In this episode of the Performance Matters podcast series, we welcome two incredible leaders from the UnitedHealthcare, UHC, Christy Pletcher and Scott Schmoldt, where they will share with us some amazing principles, four in fact, that they've used to help begin to transform their learning organization and the way they're viewed and the organization itself in workflow learning, 5 moments of need. Remarkable stuff. Give a listen, friends. All right, friends, welcome back to yet another Performance Matters podcast. Bob Mosher here, one of your hosts. It's just wonderful to be back with all of you, so appreciate the downloads, the feedback. Hopefully they're helpful. Please let us know how they're landing. No ownership here. Our goal is to lift the performance first mentality, 5 moments of need methodology. And so please, we want to do things that are helpful. So let us know. The number one request for these things is case studies. People, Con and I ramble on these things, and we do that kind of stuff periodically, which you're gracious enough to sit through. But the ones that by all means get the highest downloads are the most meaningful are people that have walked the walk. And I could not think of two better learning leaders to have on this particular episode, especially with what's going on in the world today. In our industry, but two just dear friends that I admire in all their good work. Scott Schmoldt and Christy Pletcher from UnitedHealthcare. I'm going to have them introduce themselves real quick because we always do. A little backstory, and then we're going to get into a remarkable presentation they did at our summit this year, which, by the way, little plug, comes up next year in April. If you're interested in attending, go to the website and there's more information there. So I will let our gracious leader, Christy, start first, if you don't mind. Christy, welcome.
Absolutely.
Great to have you here.
Bob, thanks for having us. It's really a pleasure to get to share our stories. So I'm Christy Pletcher, and I lead learning at UnitedHealthcare. One of the things I will say is, I've been in this industry for coming up on 30 years. It is a long time, Bob. And, I had always really valued understanding both the business that I served and L&D, and considered myself an expert in both spaces. And the purpose of that was really to drive, business value for the partners that I support with a learning function. And then about 4 years ago, I was introduced to Scott Schmoldt in UnitedHealthcare as well, who shared this methodology with us. And the amazing aha I had is probably the model and methodology I was looking for my whole career. And I don't know why I hadn't stumbled upon it in the 29 or so years, but I'm ever grateful to Scott for putting a model to what we've always been trying to achieve.
Appreciate those kind words. He is a remarkable young man. And as I always say, it takes great leadership to make this work. Christy, thanks for the role you play there, and not just there, but with our industry. So the man, Scott Schmoldt, you want to give us a little bit on how you got here as well, friend?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, and it's really, really cool to have Christy here with me today as well. She is the executive learning leader that I have been looking for my entire career, which is coming on 21 years myself, actually. I started right out of school, was supposed to go into elementary ed. That didn't happen, and ended up going into the corporate space, and have been in all sorts of different functions inside of learning for that time period. It was March of 2020 when the then CEO of the business segment I supported came to me and said, "Hey, Scott, we're sending everybody home, and we're going to continue to grow, and so we're going to continue to hire, and you have to continue to train. You need to do it completely virtually, and it's got to be better than what it has been." And so that was really kind of the gauntlet that was thrown down for me, to where I started to dive into this wonderful methodology. And if it's a fun story, I think I've shared it before, Bob, but the reason that I connected with you was that I saw you post something on LinkedIn. I don't even remember what it was anymore, but I didn't agree with it. And so I sent you a message on LinkedIn, and I was like, "Hey, Bob, I don't know if I completely agree with this." Never expected that you would ever reply. And you almost immediately did and said, "Hey, let's connect and start talking." And now that's coming on well over 6 years that we've been working on the journey together. So very, very grateful to be here once again.
All right back at you both, you youngins. My gosh, I'm I'm going on my 43rd year at this business and did start out with elementary ed too, Scott. The same deal. So it has really been a blessed path to get to this point, and of course work with folks like you. So friends listening, at the summit, we did this neat thing this year, repeating it next, called Insights for Impact, which was a time when an organization gets to do just that, share the insights that they had that drove them to impact, which is the whole idea of the methodology. And I think why we do what we do. Theirs was incredibly grounding and pragmatic and inspiring for me. Because, we talk so much about these things, and sometimes when these presentations are done, we get like a slide at the end on, so here's my 4 lessons learned. And I always leave those presentations and I'm going, okay, great. But wait, what? How did you get there? I mean, and by the way, how do I get to those 4 things that you mentioned? And you two did such a remarkable job in your guidance of the 4 principles. We'll talk about in a minute, not just in the journey and why and the reason that they are so fitting, but also what they did and what leaders might want to do with it. It's so powerful. So in your Insights for Impact, the title was 4 Principle Leaders Can Use to Build a 5 Moments of Need Capability. And this is under the Engage to Align category, which is, I think, friends, the crux. Because, you can have the best methodology, you can whatever, but if you don't have leadership, if you don't have support, if the organization doesn't get it, want it, whatever, align with it, you're a voice in the wilderness. And a lot of efforts, I think, fail. So happy with the emphasis of this idea and what you got out of it from a business perspective. So let's kick us off, Scott. I know you typically tend to get us started in this. 4 principles. Why? What are they? And then, Christy, how about some takeaways and impact?
Yeah,
would be great.
Yeah, would love to. So that was the idea when we presented, was to take a study or a story, connect it to a principle that then could become a takeaway for these learning leaders as they left the conference, a practical application of things that they can take to their teams to now start to build these capabilities inside of their teams. The cool connection point that I appreciated so much was it was never just about showing people how to build the capabilities in the learning teams. It was then we did that, but then what was the actual impact of the business that we saw because of the capabilities that we were building? So as we go through this, Christy and I will tag team that and talk about the study principle takeaway and then the impact that we've seen. And so the 4 that we're going to focus on, some of these should be really familiar to people, but spaced learning, automated knowledge, the idea of subtraction over addition, and then finally we end with engage to align. So this first one of spaced learning, this really was based upon probably one of the oldest and most proven findings in all of the learning sciences. Will Thallimer, I think, did a whole bunch of synthesis on this. He's got a whole body of work out there. But the study, what it really shows is that real learning doesn't occur in one-time event. That spaced repetition over time beats one and done always. Creates longer term retention for people. It reduces some of that forgetting curve when you do it at the right time, spaced out, all of those good things. So that's what the study showed. The principle then is that learning doesn't happen in events. It happens over time. And that leads us to some things, Bob, you and I have talked about this before. Learning doesn't equal knowing, and knowing doesn't equal performing. And so what we did instead, we started to talk about how do we build the right conditions for leaders to then be able to reinforce inside of the environment that we're in. So we talked a lot about, we didn't roll out Enable. This wasn't an event. This wasn't a thing that we just activated once and then let it sit. We focused on very disciplined activation, was reinforced over time, that was connected to things like quality expectations, that was connected to the actual work that people were doing in the design function. They literally used projects that they were working on and learned how to build Enable capabilities doing real work. So we started to see some things, right? People stopped kind of designing by default events, and they started thinking about performance conversations instead. So again, I framed this as one thing you can start to do as a leader is stop asking, how do we do the 5 moments of need? Bob, you got a great story about that too, right? And instead start asking, how do we sequence these capabilities over time so that it sticks? And Christy, would love to hear from you quickly on, what was kind of the impact that then we saw in the businesses that we were supporting as we were building those capabilities?
Yeah, sure, Scott. It's a great question because that's where, right, the rubber really meets the road, so to say. So we ate our own Cheerios. I love idioms, and Scott knows this. So, and that's a Scott Schmoldt favorite, though. So as our designers learned in that way, they started building content, as Scott said, in that way. We've got a really great example where we've been trying to drive members in healthcare to digital assets over time using apps, right? How many, think about, you still go to your doctor's office and they might fax something or take a photocopy of your member card, right? We're trying to really modernize healthcare. And part of that is, letting members access care and information when and where they need it. And so we created a series that lasted over time, Drive to Digital, to educate employees, call center employees, on how to educate our members on those assets. And it was microlearning over time, 6 months. And when we stopped, they asked for more. They wanted to know where it went because things were still changing in our digital assets all the time. And so, right, there was a strong appetite for it and really connecting. And so we've seen and been able to measure our contribution along with the changes that that they're making. That's a hard thing always in L&D to say that learning was the only thing that impacted the results, but we've seen a 56% increase in member chats, 76% year over year increase in mobile app visits, 3% of calls obviated. And at the scale of UnitedHealthcare, that's pretty immense. Along with a 96 learner NPS score for the program. And it's in its 3rd year at this point, actually. So talk about spaced over time. It's still ongoing in year 3, and we're seeing pretty tremendous results.
So if I may use one of those things, Christy, the elephant in the room for me is that, Scott, this is one of the longest standing research in our industry. Why do you think this idea is so hard for L&D to adopt? What do you think stands in the way of spaced learning? Is it legacy? Is it they just don't know how to do it? What do you think stops this principle from getting the legs that it's proven over and over again it has?
I can comment on that first, Scott, if you
Go.
Okay.
Go.
So, earlier in my career, before we had the proven capability to do this, every senior leader wanted to see the event. The event was more visible to them than the microlearning, than the short bursts, than the ongoing series of, no, I need you to do something so that the next day they can perform differently.
Yeah.
There's a pretty strong bias toward that, I think, in a lot of our senior leaders. And, getting their buy-in to do things a little bit differently can be challenging. But I think once you prove performance and that it works, it's easier to do. Scott, I don't know if that resonates for you or you'd say something different.
No, 100%. I think we've been conditioned over the course of really a century plus at this point to view and think about how people learn in a specific way. And oftentimes we think about classrooms and rows and talking head in the front of the room, dispelling knowledge upon you. And it's never really worked that way. I mean, I can remember like some of my favorite classrooms growing up as a kid were the ones where we weren't in rows, but we were sitting wherever we needed to sit. and it was active, and it wasn't passive.
Mm-hmm.
So none of this
Mm-hmm.
has ever really worked. It's just kind of the way I think we've been conditioned over the course of time, and I think that just very much cemented in everybody. There's almost this bias of like, if I didn't go to the actual event, how could I possibly be expected to perform something now? It's never been true. And again, this study shows it. So I think, and there might be some pressure too, like, if you have not if you have not changed that perception yet through the impact of performance, it could be hard for leaders to go in front of business partners and say, you know what, that's not really what you need. You need something different, and here's what it's going to be. So there's a bit of proving ground that has to take place first too. And I think, Christy, you alluded to that, right? Once we start showing the actual business impact, that's when hearts and minds can start to change. But I think it's just hard, Bob.
Yeah. Calling her baby ugly is hard. I mean, I remember showing some pretty remarkable ROI metrics out of this methodology to a learning leader once, and I appreciate the candor. I don't know if I agree, but he said, I'm not showing that to anybody. It's because what that does is it shows how broken my product has been for so long. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of a way to think about it. But do you think they don't know this? I mean, it's so owning it. And we're in the learning business. Doctors don't use leeches anymore because at one time we thought they worked. So we ate our own dog food here, and there you go, another one, Christy. And we found a better way. That's our responsibility, and I think you guys so bravely did that. So Scott, why don't you introduce us to Principle 2?
So this is based on a principle, another famous one by Dr. Richard Clark. It's around how we automate knowledge as adults. Most of the work that we perform is automated, and I think I can say this without getting into too much trouble. A lot of it has to do with like resource save for us as humans. We automate the work that we do because there's a cognitive load to having to remember everything. And so the principle is proven in different ways, but the illustration that I used was at the presentation was, you ever drive to the grocery store and then you drive back home and you don't remember actually driving back home? You don't remember making turn signals. You don't remember going through stop signs. Like, you don't remember it. It's because you automated it. You automated it to save on that cognitive load. And so that happens to us at work too. And generally what happens is that under pressure, people revert back to the habits and the old ways of them doing things. Change fails because habits override the good intention of the new. So the principle that we talked about was that you can't change behavior by teaching what people already, finger quote, know. Because this autopilot drives performance, awareness alone of things doesn't change behavior. And when it gets hard, we go back to the habit. So in this case, as we talk about building capabilities around Enable in our design team, we stopped asking, how do we get people to follow this model? And we started asking, what are the defaults that people are falling back on? And how do we change those conditions? So this is where we started to change things like our intake questions. We started to change things like our quality requirements that we have. We started to reinforce those behaviors that were done repeatedly, not just done correctly, but that were done repeatedly over the course of time, to create the condition in the environment where people, when they fell under stress, they didn't fall back on old habits, but they started to revert to these new things. And so I think there's some really good examples around this, Christy. Like, I think about the CCQ program launch and how we saw that as we built these capabilities here, how that helped influence the business impact from a CCQ perspective. Would you talk about that?
That's a great one, actually, Scott, because when we introduced this new quality program for all call center employees across our teams, there is a reliance, especially when calls get more difficult, like they are as we're eliminating the easy calls, to revert back to their prior knowledge, how they opened the call, how they closed the call, how they answered questions and or asked questions of our members. And so when, when we launched this, we really influenced what I would call sort of maybe more traditional change management concepts here as well. But we first educated the supervisors so that they could help explain the program to the employees. And we made them calibrate first before we ever launched it to their teams. We trained the teams, but changed their incentive program. We changed their coaching program. We changed how we listened and calibrated calls. So it wasn't just the training that we produced, right? It wasn't just a training event to say, here's how you do it differently. It's materials to support after the fact for their leaders around, coaching. We use the ADKAR model in UnitedHealthcare, but it was a lot of the reinforcement and the incentive programs that came with it to make sure that that was a change that would stick. And it really has influenced or impacted the scores that we're getting as we roll this to different call center areas. And we see much higher post-call, NPS scores or however you measure it once we launch this program.
Yeah, that's really remarkable. Khan always talks about automaticity, right? And it's just such a hard change of the 5 moments is the hardest because to an adult, it's that undoing of how I used to do it before. And to your point, when you get out in the world of apply, it's one thing to be brought in for upgrade classes or, what's the new blah, blah, blah. But then when I get back in the workflow and the rubber meets the road and I'm on a call or I'm a salesperson and I'm hitting quota at the end of the month and I really would love to sell that new thing you told me, but frankly, I know the old one. So I'm just going to sell the old one because my incentive, I love that. I love where you went with that, you guys. The tail that's wagging the dog was my quota. And so in the end, I'm going to get to my quota the way I can and the way I know. Changing the outcome, not just assuming that the knowledge was enough, was a powerful part of this. Did you get any pushback on that when you started going at it from that direction, from the lines of business?
Yes, absolutely. There was, well, our supervisors don't have time, or that we don't need to do all of the extra work. These things take time and energy. And even just thinking about how we, I don't know, I don't know about a lot of companies, but the pace of change is fast. So we launch something, we want to move on.
Yep.
So this tendency to launch it and forget and go to the next thing is real. And we really had to, over time, we've refined, we're in this one too, a second year of this program, launching it to different call centers across the enterprise. And it just keeps getting better because the value, again, is seen. And so we can tell that story. So they're more willing to invest.
Likewise, we saw the resistance inside of the learning organization too, because we started to incentivize different things. So instead of incentivizing you for the simple build of content or the way that the content looked, we started now to incentivize you around, is this connected to an RWA? Do we have performance metrics that we are working to address? Have we moved beyond simple learning outcomes to actual performance outcomes for people? And then when you start to align the actual quality expectations around that, it's hard. It is a change, just like Christy was talking about in the business, and it was a change for our folks too. But again, the key here was to do it consistently and do it over time, back to the spaced learning, and to make sure that we were reinforcing and incentivizing the right things, where enable became not something that we just simply did, but it became our raison d'etre, right? It was the reason for us being here and why we are doing what we are doing. So it's not completely there, right? But from where we were, year and a half, 2 years ago to where we are now, it's unbelievably different. Now, when I sit on calls with people, I hear them talking about, the performance outcome that the business is looking for. I hear them talking about when we ask questions like, well, okay, now if this new AI capability is going to be put in play, where do we start? And they start by saying we start with the RWA. We have to understand how this is impacting the workflow. So the whole mindset around performance first has started to shift. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we recognized this automation of knowledge principle and then built conditions around it to support them when stuff got tough.
Stay the course, right? I mean, we're battling Addy here. Those people out there listening, don't get angry with me. I get hate mail about this one because I go at it almost every podcast. But let's let it go to a degree, right? I mean, let's go with it. But to your point, and why you both, I think, are so successful and remarkable leaders around this and others, is that you stay the course. You stay on message, right? Good parenting is consistency, right? I mean, the minute that the kid sees that the bars are shifting, they're all over. It's that kind of deal. And as one person said, it's a battle of attrition. Right? I was doing a change management group. Christy, you'll appreciate this, in a large military organization. And one of the more senior leaders came up to me and said, look, I'm going to be here longer than you. So I'm just going to wait it out. Yeah. And so there was the line in the sand, right? And what you've done such a great job is that no, we're going to stay on point. We're going to stay on message. We're going to reinforce for what you're doing. And we're going to allow that change to be okay. And allow you to be safe, not to have to fall back on what has worked each time. But it's a battle, right? All right. So our next one, this is my favorite of these, because I think it's an interesting thing. We do this in L&D all the time because we just want to do things so well and good and thorough and perfect. But before we know it, we've got a monster to wrangle. Scott, principle 3.
Principle 3 is this based upon a study that was done at the University of Virginia. And I'll tell you the principle in a second. But the study took university students, placed them in a room with bridges made out of Legos, and they were asked to make the bridge better, safer, more sturdy, like whatever the parameters were. And what was observed was that every one of the students defaulted to trying to add pieces to the bridge to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, the better solution was to remove pieces. And so that study points us to this principle of subtraction. We, as humans, when change feels risky, we default to add. But oftentimes, that does not improve performance. Why do we do this? I think it feels responsible. This is I think about, okay, there's a policy and a procedure, and somebody follows it, but they mess it up, they get something wrong. And so now it's been audited, and now it comes back to them. And the default position that I see all of the time is we should add more stuff to this P&P so that then they don't do it wrong in the future. Again, I think it feels responsible. It feels safe. It feels like, okay, more guidance is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, oftentimes it's not. It does the opposite of what you think it is going to do. So as we started to build out the capabilities of Enable and the 5 moments of need framework in our teams, we stopped asking, what do we need to do to make this work? And we started asking, what can we remove to actually help make performance easier for people, both internally for our learning teams, as well as then the impact that had on the business. So like for us, aligning around this really helped, because when we had a common methodology, we had common intake, we had common quality, we removed unnecessary steps for our designers. They weren't trying to do things differently across. We were all doing the same. We were all following the same methodology. We were using the same tools, same technologies. We simplified their decision logic in a lot of ways. We're going to run an RWA, and here's how we're going to do it. So we reduced kind of the volume of rules that they had. We made clear intent for them to operate inside of. And then that translated into the business in a huge way, right, Christy? Because we started to see things like when we started to build then solutions for our business partners, we reduced kind of the low value builds that we were making. We eliminated redundant content and artifacts. Like we were able to get to the place where we could certify training might not be the right solution here, and here's what is. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you saw the impact there?
For sure. I've got a really great new example, Scott, maybe that you haven't heard, but we, we have no doubt a lot of pressure in healthcare, and a lot of our business leaders that we support have a lot of pressure. And
Mm.
so they get it when they are seeing something in an audit that is wrong, or, one of our clients comes and says, you're not meeting our standards. They start to react and everything becomes training. Can you train them on it?
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure every single person listening would raise their hand if I said, how many of you had, business partners come to you and say, can you build me an hour-long training on this? And they're prescribing, right?
Yep.
Uh, Recently, we went, we analyzed quality review trends, um, other insights from a group that our data analytics team, and came back to them with, I'm going to use actually the other two examples of space learning and changing the environment. We set aside 10 minutes a day for them to take a piece of content. They're micro learnings. They're short. It's every day on the key error trends we saw. And their leaders can help prescribe which ones those are. They can select them, et cetera. But instead of this reaction where everything becomes training, we're saying, here are the trends we see and training you can take over time in kind of a logical way. It's reducing the noise. It's reducing the noise for our team in the terms
Hmm.
of we get, and it's reducing the noise for the employee to understand what they should be focusing on. In
Mm.
that environment where everything is a training, it becomes hard for them to understand how to really improve performance. And we're trying to give them really key ways to do that by changing the environment, and really, right, only focusing on the things that are really needed to drive that.
Yeah, I always tell the story, you guys, when I went into a large entertainment organization, and they had done a huge rollout in the parks of this ERP kind of system. And they had 4 weeks of training for everyone. And it failed miserably. People hated the system. They weren't using it. The uptake was bad, the whole deal. And so clearly a performance problem from bad training. And I go to sit in the room with the stakeholder of that system. They were doing another rollout. I was there with my learning champion who wanted to adopt this methodology. And the stakeholder goes, before you start, I want to hear all this. This really sounds great. I kind of got a little bit of it before I came in here, but I was thinking about the program, and maybe fundamentally where we start is, why not 6 weeks? Why not 6 weeks of training? The 4 was clearly not enough. And this speaks to oh my gosh, you guys, this speaks exactly to this issue, and back to falling what we know and we're scared and all the other stuff. But the idea to continue to over engineer a bad thing just felt safe. It felt like the first thing to try, as opposed to, what if we took those 4 weeks back to 2, made them a little more intentional, Chrissy, to your point, and more focused, and enable the system in the parks, help them learn while doing. We know the common problems they call the help desk about. What if we targeted those and gave them cheat sheets that they could just refer to for the 6 most common things they called in about all the time? That it is a different idea of looking at, how things have been done, and taking away, not adding on. Now, again, did you meet much resistance? What do people from the team, from the organization, about this subtraction versus addition?
Well, in this one, I would say there's still some ongoing resistance because it feels scary to not
Sure.
train to every issue and audit and problem and
Yep.
one-off situation that they see. So this one,
Mm.
I'm confident the results will come in and we'll win them over. But there's still I've had to set real clear expectations with the leader of their executive team of these are the 5 things we're focusing on. This is what's going to drive your top performance based on all the data we've seen, engaging with your, data scientists, et cetera. And trust us. This will help move the needle. So, proof will be in the pudding, Bob, but I'm confident. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
and I think,
and go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think this is the beauty of Enable and the methodology, though, because um, and the beauty of truly identifying the critical impact and the complexity of the tasks that people do, and then being able to, with evidence, show that to say, here's why we are going to focus on those 5 things.
Target.
And these other things, they can go into the workflow. We can still provide the support for them. We're not saying we're not going to support them on these, but we are saying this is where the critical impact is going to be, and here's how we know it. That's just different. Again, that is a different. It's a different way of thinking from a learning and a traditional L&D team.
It is,
but it's having impact.
It's that cover it fear, right? And somewhere along the lines, cover it became knowing it, being able to learn it and apply it. My jargon has changed to, I'm going to cover everything, but I'm not going to train it all. And that's the nuance of the digital coach or things in the workflow or coaching, those type of stuff. It's getting covered just the way it should be done best and learned. And we're still going to target, as you outlined, Christy, brilliantly, the 5 things that should be targeted. And everything else, we're going to give you ways for it to take care of itself in an intentional way, not a chaotic way, but in an intentional way. And yeah, it brings back brilliant results. So I'm anxious to hear, Christy, how that all goes.
I think allowing employees to focus, though, too, is so important.
Sure.
What are the things I really need to do to perform versus,
that.
The pace right now of change, it can be daunting for employees to try to keep up and perform.
Of course, cognitive load. I mean, this is some of the most ancient research like spaced learning, but we violate this principle over and over and over again. And we're asked to violate it by people who at the end, when they finally at the other end of the fire hose go, well, that was useless. Or I can't remember half of that. Or the training was terrible. It's like, but we keep cycling on this self-inflicted thing when backing off, take a breath, prioritize what's most critical, and will help you take care of the rest. We're not leaving you out there. We'll help you take care of the rest. Takes that down, right? And makes them more focused. So powerful. So last principle, Scott, you want to take us into that and we'll wrap up?
Yeah, the final one that we talk about here is engage to align. And the idea is that having shared intent, both across a learning organization as well as your business partners, enables better decisions. So the story that I use is 19th century Prussian army, that they were extremely capable, very intelligent, but they ran into problems on the battlefield when conditions changed, and when they changed rapidly, the orders that they had gotten became obsolete. The battle plan became obsolete. And so what the Prussian army did is they created something called mission command, which what that really was they just had all of their soldiers align on the intent of the mission prior to going out and executing it, so that when those conditions changed on the battlefield, their mission didn't. The intent around what they were trying to execute stayed the same, but it allowed them to pivot and to, in real time, do what they needed to do to continue to work towards the mission. That principle applies for us too, that having a shared intent really enables better decisions at the moment of need. So when we think about building the capabilities in a learning team to start with around this, when people share a clear understanding of the purpose of the success and decision criteria, they don't need to wait for instructions. They know how to go now and perform. They can adapt, they can choose, they can act effectively in the flow of work. And the intent guides them, not the script. So when we started building this capability, we started that. We said we got to stop asking how do we explain enable better? Like, how do we do that with our design teams? And instead truly align around performance intent. How do we make sure that we're spending more of our time aligning with our designers around intent and outcomes and decision criteria? And we used Enable to create that shared judgment. We weren't looking for uniform behavior, but we wanted to have alignment more so than compliance. And so that's how when we work to build these capabilities in the teams, that's really what we focused on. And what's cool about this is that the result then wasn't just better compliance to Enable, it was better decision making. So designers became more capable of determining what was truly required, and what needed to be targeted training, what needed to be in the workflow, and that then resulted in initiatives in the business like Drive to Digital, Christy, where we started to see impact at scale, all because of this capability that we built.
Yeah. There are so many examples as this kind of these 4 principles wrap us up, Scott, that I could share, but I've got just a favorite one of, our new hire programs can be lengthy because healthcare isn't easy. You're dealing with health and money, and these are two, and family impacts. These are the most important things to people. And so we have been able to take one of our onboarding programs through all of these principles around what are the most important things, right, to align on. What is the true performance? What are the most critical things that are going to drive that performance? And how do we get them doing it quicker instead of getting all the backstory behind it? So we've taken a program and reduced it by over 25%. Our onboarding programs, again, aren't short, but 25% is a pretty significant amount of time. And in fact, when you think about impact, that has resulted in a run rate this year of close to a $10 million save for one of my business partners that I support in their area. Right. So really seeing that. But the interesting part is in that 20, +% reduction, the performance is better. Every time we reduce, it gets better. And every time our team says, you know what, I'm going to go back and try this Enable thing again, and I'm going to do a couple more tweaks to the program, it gets better. And so the one of the key partners that, business partners that I support, is in this area. In fact, this year, sitting around a table, told our story for us. Sitting in a room of COOs, said, wow, she's able to do it quicker and better than anything I've ever seen. She meaning my team, really, because it's not me. And, but was pointing at me and said, they're the cornerstone of our success and performance, and talked about some of these things. And I didn't have to say a word. And so and in fact, that business partner doesn't know what Enable is, right? They only know that, and the language I use is, I'm going to help you perform better and do it faster for you. And, right, that's the focus that this team has. Every time one of our team members now on Scott and I's teams show up, they're talking about the impacts that we're having, and they can do it now because we've had that very clear focus, not on all of the things, but are we really aligned on performance? And how are we talking about it? And it, like I said, the outcome of being asked to more tables than we can probably support, as an L&D leader, is pretty gratifying as well. Because the biggest thing we all ask for is a seat at the table.
The highest compliment.
Yeah.
It's the highest compliment. When training is the tip of the sword, both in what we think we make and what the learner thinks they need. Oh my gosh, the cup isn't big enough. The cup's never big enough.
It's not big enough.
Because there's always so much to say, always so much to cover, always so much to keep up with, and so on. If performance becomes the pivot, the training modality shrinks significantly because it has a different focus. It has a different intent. And it becomes about enabling performance, not covering stuff. Right.
Like you, Bob, and I know you'll probably ask the question of resistance, like you going into the theme parks, we've had to do that over time. Let me take 2 more days out of training and show you I can still.
Absolutely.
Let me take 2 more days out of training, 1 more day this year, 1 more day next year, 1 more day this month. And just, again, really proving it that with just starting small, we can make an impact. And I would venture to say, if I said, I'll take 2 more weeks out, they'd be at this point would say, great, go do that.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
I think I told you guys this quote. My mother, when I was in a more exasperating time of my educational career, very young, ready to change the world, did a misstep because I was young, and it bit me back. And administratively, politically, all these things. And my mother said, son, although there will be revolutionary methodologies and technology in instruction, they'll only ever be adopted in an evolutionary way. And you tried to revolutionize your school district in a board meeting, and the horse bucked. So your idea was great. Your delivery was terrible. And the approach and the strategy, you went revolutionary when you tried to change a long-standing mindset and approach that if you had evolved it by the 2 days less, not I can cut it in half. Mm-hmm. No one believes you can cut it in half.
Right.
Right. We can, but no one believes you can cut it in half, and you're dead in the water before you start half the time.
You said we're in this for the long haul, and that couldn't be more true. I'm a believer of that, Bob. I've been at 2 companies, one for 12 years and one for 17 years in this career. And so, I'm dedicated to really proving that learning is the biggest probably enabling function that the company has, and the tip of the sword, as you say. And I this methodology, to go back to kind of the beginning, right, is really what has given our team the ability to demonstrate what I've always tried to go after. And I'm in it for the long haul, and I'll still be here for a while around it. But thank you for
my gosh,
for it, because it's given us the ability to just operationalize it at scale across an extremely, Fortune 5 company. So.
Wow. I'm just going to kind of leave that there. Right. Scott, any parting words on your side of this?
Think that Christy said it. You've been telling me a long time, Bob. But if there are folks out there like me who are exceedingly excited about this and want to just run at this very, very hard, restraint and restraint. This isn't going to happen overnight. Okay, it takes time, and if you run at it too hard, I think it will spook people, and I'm learning that. And Christy is a very great role model for me for that, because I do believe we hold in our hands a responsibility, because I do think that we're the organization that sits so close to the actual task level where people do the work. We know it, and we know how to make it better. But restraint. I don't mean restraint in like you should be growing your capability. Yes, exactly. Like we need to be cautious of how we talk about this with our business partners, because it is different. But it is what they're looking for. So always a pleasure chatting with you, my friend.
You as well. If I've heard Con Gottfredson say it once, he said it 1,000 times: don't boil the ocean. Right? We see the end. We've experienced it, but you have to bring the organization along. It's what they've wanted, but not what they've been taught to ask for. And the devil that a lot more comforting than the one you don't. And we're bringing in one that they don't. So I'm inspired every time I hear you talk. Gets me up in the morning. Those listening, I hope you're catching the energy, enthusiasm, and the lessons learned from this. But I can say it works. It works. You've got two people on this call that have proven that and continue to. Thank you for who you are, all you do, the journey you're on. It's an honor to be a part of that. Thanks so much for being here, guys.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
It's great to be here.
Well, that's it for this episode of the 5 Moments of Need Performance Matters series. We look forward to future conversations around how to best put the 5 Moments of Need into practice. We welcome your feedback and can be reached on our 5 Moments of Need website, which is www.5momentsofneed.com. We hope you're finding these helpful and will subscribe to future episodes. Have a great day, friends.